Hello everybody. We would like to present our presentation, and today's topic is phonological alternation, process and rules. We are from group 2 and the member of groups are first me, Arum Puspita Sari, and my student number is 090. Second is Putri Reski Amalia, and the student number is 097. The third is Sahista. The student number is 098, and the last Mutiara Anugerah, the student number is 099. First topic is phonological rules. Phonological rules can be divided into two levels of representation. First is underlying, phonemic and mental. Second is surface, phonetic. And why do we need rules? First, we need rules to link the two levels. The second, show when a particular allophone should show up on the surface. The second topic is alternation. The focus of phonological is finding predictable alternation between sounds, for example, P and P. In English, there is one phoneme P. There is alternation in the representation of this element on the surface phonetic level between P and P. This alternation is determined by the environment in which the phoneme occurs. And the third is process. This alternation occurs due to or because of some phonological process. For example, the process involved in the alternation between P and P is called aspiration. In English, a voiceless stop is aspirated when it occurs in syllable initial position before a stressed vowel not following S. The fourth is rules. We can represent processes with characterized alternation by means of rules. Rules are formal statements which express the relationship between units on the different levels of the phonological component. For example, the rule for aspiration, as we can see on the screen, minus cont, minus voice, minus del rel, into plus split glottis, and it can be divided into two plus syllable and plus stress. The fifth is generative phonology. Generative phonology is to identify alternation, phonological process behind them, and the formalizing of rules. Alternation are a central part of what native speakers know about their language. The aim of generative phonology is to give formal representation in such knowledge.
Then alternation types. Phonological alternations come in many shapes and sizes. In A, there is alternation between oral and nasal vowels, with versus win. In B, in is realized differently because it agrees in place of articulation with the following consonant. Inedible, in Edinburgh versus impossible, impression versus inconceivable in Cardiff. In C, plural marker is realized as se, the, or is, depending on the nature of the preceding sound. Rats versus warthogs versus horses. In D, alternation is voicing for root final fricative, leaf versus leaves, house versus houses. In E, alternation between a stop versus fricative, electric versus electricity, medical versus medicinal. Alternation are different in a number of ways. It occurs whenever the phonetic environment is met, may only be found in the presence of a particular suffix or particular lexical items, the phonetic environment by itself is not enough to trigger the alternation, and alternation may be optional. And then phonetically conditioned alternations. Alternations in A and B are conditioned purely by the phonetic environment. In English, these are obligatory or difficult for speakers to avoid. Also includes aspirated versus non-aspirate, voiceless stops, p in pot and p in spot, lateral and nasal release, like beetle versus mouton, flapping, clear versus darko, like let versus full. The intrusive in non-rhotic English as in tuna or alert. Phonetically and morphologically conditioned alternation. The alternations are also clearly motivated by the phonetic environment. The form of the plural depends on the nature of the last sound. The first, if the noun ends in sibilant s, z, sh, zoh, sof, thoh, it takes is. Second, if the final sound is a voiceless non-sibilant, it takes the voiceless alveolar fricatives s. And the last, if the final sound is a voice non-sibilant, it takes the voice fricative z. Do not necessarily occur whenever the phonetic environment alone is met. Example, fans, bass are counter-examples. The final fricative agrees in voice with the preceding sound only if it represents the plural marker. If there is a morpheme boundary between the two segments, this alternation is obligatory and automatic. When the alternation comes in a predictable way, it is called productive. Other example includes the past tense marker td, id. Phonetically, morphologically, and lexically conditioned alternation. Example in E and D above involve phonetic conditioning. Fricatives are voiced between voice segments like leaf and leaves. Velar stop K is fronted and fricatives. The s, the term of this particular process is velar softening, like electric, electricity. Also, some morphological conditioning only for a particular set of lexical items. Others include vowel shifts or trisyllabic shortening. Example, insane versus insanity and reptile versus reptilian. And the last, non-phonological alternation, suppletion. Suppletion is an alternation in which there is no curtain phonetic conditioning or no phonological processes, and is not part of our phonological knowledge. For example, mouse versus mice, go versus.
Okay, next is about formal rules and rule writing. First, we talk about formal rules. A rule in phonology consists of some phonological element, typically a segment or a feature, which undergoes some change in a particular environment. As it is written in 9.3, the rule in 9.3 represents the state of affairs in which A becomes B between X and Y. We could take a concrete example, the flapping rule of American English, according to which a T is pronounced as a flap R when it occurs between two vowels T, provided that the second vowel is not stressed. So A is the same as T. and B is the same as R. So X is the same as P and Y is the same as prosyllabic means stress, as shown in 9.4. Well, this rule would capture the process found in many varieties of English by which a T becomes a glottal stop after a vowel at the end of a word. For example, in words like cap and hit, which surface as cat and hit. That is, phoneme T is realized as the allophone when preceded by a vowel and followed by the end of a word. The rule for glottalism we have just seen can also be recast in 9.6 using the feature contrasted glots where the plus value indicates glottal closure. A further example of the use of features in a rule can be seen with words such as mean, take, and make, where a voiceless stop is glottalized, reinforced rather than replaced by a glottal stop. See section 3.1.5. Thus, we might write the rules as in the rule 9.7. As you can see on the screen, using features in rules expresses this generalization. In this case, using the features main continuum and voice allows the rule to express a process affecting the entire class of voiceless stop of English, where a segment-based attempt would require several rules, one for each stop. In other words, the rule in 9.7 accounts for final glottalized P, T, K in any word. If we could only use segment in a rule, not features, we would need three rules. Formally, there is no reason why just these three segments should be affected. By including a feature in the rule, we capture the generalization that all voiceless stop do this. So the process is one affecting the class of voiceless stops, not an apparently random set of segments. Then the parenthesis notation. To illustrate the application of parenthesis notation, let us look at velarization in English. So words like leaf have a clear L, and words like fell and book have a velarized L. These two words, fell and book, show velarization occurring either at the end of a word or before a consonant at the end of a word. The parentheses here indicate that there many or may not be a consonant between the lateral and the end of the word. Okay, so next is braces. Another notational device used in linear rule writing is brace notation, also known as curly brackets. Brace notation represents an either or relationship between two environments. In other words, the same process occurs in two partially different environments, and the rule captures the fact that is the same process despite the difference in environment, as we see in rules 9.11 on the screen. Then superscript and subscripts. Superscript and subscript number associated with variables let us express minimum and maximum numbers of segments relevant to a given environment. Let us imagine that our basic rule of A, B, or X Y turns on I vowel into an I after any consonant C and before any double consonant. That is, the Y variable has to be at least two consonants. So an imaginary word like niece would be pronounced niece, while a word like niece will be pronounced niece. We can represent this as in rule 9.15. We can see on the screen where the subscript indicates the minimum numbers of elements required for the rule to apply. Thus, this rule states that I becomes I when followed by a minimum of two consonants. The superscript indicates the maximum number of elements allowable for the rule to apply. According to this rule, "nis" would surface as "nis", but "nis" would be "nis" since "nis" exceeds the maximum number of consonants specified. In other words, the rule does not apply in this case of "nis" since the structural description of the rule is not met. Thus, the superscript and subscript numbers associated with elements in a rule allow us to specify the number of such elements in a particular environment. Note that there is some overlap with parentheses. C10 represents the same things as C.
Alpha notation, consider the following words of English. Unproductive, indeed in the D, include D. Note that in each case the nasal stop shares the same place of articulation with the consonant which follows it. See section 3.4. Recalling the discussion of feathers in chapter 7, we see that P, D, and K can be distinguished using the feathers coronal and anterior. See section 7.3.3. As in, for example, as in 9.17, we can see on the screen like that, and it is the values of n core which m, n, and ng share with p, d, and k respectively. For example, in 9.18, as we can see on the screen, in order to capture the generalization that n serves as n, or ng, depending on the feather specification for anterior and coronal of the following segments. We need some way of matching the feathers involved. Note that we cannot capture this assimilation as a single feathers matching process by using plus and minus, since the realization of n as m requires a change from plus core to minus core with plus n remaining consonant, while the realization of n as ng requires not only a change from plus core to minus core, but also a change from plus n to minus n. If you were to use plus and minus, a separate rule for its assimilation will be required. This kind of feather matching generalization is precisely what allophonation allows us to capture. Replacing the plus and minus value of regular feather specification, alpha A represents either plus or minus, matching the value of an occurrence of the feather in question elsewhere in the rule. Taking the example of nasal assimilation, we can characterize what is going on in the following way. By using two Greek letter variables represented by A and B, we can match the value for these feathers between the consonant and the nasal, as we can see on the screen in the 9.19. This rule states that the values for anterior and coronal of the nasal stop must match the values for anterior and coronal of the following consonant. Note that by using A and B, the values for anterior and coronal are independent of each other. Had we used only A, then the values for anterior and coronal would have to match each other as well. A and A core means that if the value for anterior is minus anterior, then the value for coronal is minus coronal. If a happens to stand for minus anywhere in a rule, it stands for minus. Everywhere in a rule, likewise, if it happens to stand for plus anywhere in a rule, it stands for plus everywhere in a rule. Using both A and B allows each feature to be specified independently without affecting other features. If more than two features need to be specified independently, the rest of Greek alphabet can be used. For example, G, D, E.
Overview of phonological operations and rules. A. Feature changing rules. Feature changing rule is the mirror image process of dissimilation, in which two adjacent segments which share some feature changes to become less like each other. Other feature-changing operations include processes like flapping and glutatization. The second one, dilation. As distinct from feature-changing rules, there are other rules which manipulate entire segments. Example, whole features matrices. Dilation is expressed in terms of a segment becoming zero. As you can see on the screen, example 9.27 and also 9.22. See insertion. An insertion rule is the mirror image of a deletion rule. So interesting, some segment A would be expressed by starting with 0, 0 to A. As you can see on the screen, the example is 9.23. D. Metathesis. Metathesis refers to the reversal of a sequence of elements, typically whole segments, in a word. This can be represented abstractly by assigning a number, known as an index, to each of the segments invoked and showing the original underlying order to the left of the arrow and the new metathesized order on the right. As you can see on the screen, the example 9.24 and 9.25. E. Reduplication. Reduplication, a process involving both phonology and word formation. Reduplication entails copying all or part of word, then attaching the copy to the original word. English has very little evidence of reduplication, apart from some reduplicative compounds. Example, helter-skelter, puh, puh, and some infantile words such as we. While this phenomenon is not common in English or other European languages, some languages, example, Samoan, Samoa, Tagalog, Philippines, Dakota, North America, use reduplication extensively to indicate morphological categories like tense and number. As you can see on the screen, in 9.26 and 9.27. That's all from our presentation. Thank you.